Hello, everyone. I am Christine Whitmarsh. I am the CEO and founder of the Inc. Agency, or you may know me as Christine Inc., I-N-K. That's my personal brand. And I am here today representing my group, my Facebook group, Inc. Authors. And I have yet another one of my expert Q&As happening today with an amazing friend of mine, Diane Kennedy. And let me go ahead and introduce you to her. Just some quick housekeeping. I am going to have everybody muted with their video off, just for the purposes of a nice, clean interview here. And please feel free to, and definitely encourage you to use the Zoom group chat for questions, especially if you have questions for Diane as we go along. I'll be asking her your tax questions and book launch questions at the end. But yeah, please feel free to use the group chat. So without further ado, let's introduce Miss Diane. Diane Kennedy is a CPA with over 35 years of experience advising some of the nation's wealthiest and most prominent business and real estate investors. She's listed on the short list of who's who at Wikipedia as a real estate entrepreneur and was one of the first Rich Dad advisors to international bestseller Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad author, very famous author. She's also the New York Times bestselling author and co-author of 10 tax and real estate books, co-founder of the full-service national virtual tax practice U.S. Tax Aid Services, and founder of the virtual bookkeeping firm Cash Flow Accounting. She also provides tax and financial information through ustaxaid.com, Twitter. She's at Diane Kennedy CPA on Twitter, and the Facebook group at Diane Kennedy's U.S. Tax Services. She discloses the money-making, tax-saving, and asset protection secrets that the mega rich use to everyday Americans in real language with actionable steps. Welcome, Diane.
Hey, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, this is great. I do like the Zoom. This is good. We're still recording. We're still here. Everything's working. Okay. These are pretty informal interviews. I'm not Barbara Walters. Just my mother wanted me to be Barbara Walters. It just didn't work out.
And, you know, for anybody who doesn't know, Christine and I know each other in real life. We both lived in Reno. I went west. She went east. And so we're now about as far apart as you can be on a continent. But it's like, it's funny that we all started in the desert.
It is, and it was funny because I think we met for the first time in person at the hairdresser, and I recognized your voice or something, and and you were getting your hair shampoo, and I think I yelled across the hair salon, "Are you Diane Kennedy?" I think we know each other.
That's exactly what happened.
That was really funny.
Networking at its finest.
Never know. Yeah, stories are great. All right, so we're going to talk about two different things today. Obviously, we're going to start with taxes. That's your area of expertise. But also, I'm really fascinated by the success that you've achieved launching all of these best-selling books. You have a really great launch process for nonfiction authors, so we'll also be talking about that today. All right, so let's start with the obvious one for authors. As far as doing their taxes, what are some unique things that authors and freelance writers need to take into consideration that maybe wouldn't apply to other people?
Okay, so this is a huge one, and it happens as soon as you're considered serious as a writer. And in the past, that always meant you had to be published, and that was back in the days when you'd go out and get a print publisher, and you went through Random House or any of those guys, and so it was kind of a big deal. But in today's world, anybody can publish. I mean, you could write something and be published by Monday, just doing print on demand with Amazon, for example. So the IRS still hasn't quite figured out, does that count? Or maybe you don't even publish in print. Maybe you just do a blog. Is that becoming a true author? So that's a little fuzzy right now. But the thing is, once you're considered serious as a published author, then just about anything that you do that might be considered research can be a deduction. So one of my favorite things is although I write about business and real estate and taxes and that kind of thing, let's say I decide, I think what I really want to do is write an Italian cookbook. And the fact that I have a history of doing that means I can go to Italy for a month and tour, take cooking classes and go spend some time in the wine regions. By the way, I'd rather write a wine book. But all of that would be a deduction because it's research. Now, I don't actually ever have to write a book about that because I've already proven that I go out and research stuff and then I write about it. So I always think that's interesting when you take a look at some of the really famous big money makers and they're suddenly writing about flying a helicopter. And they got that somehow in their storyline. And then you find out they've just started flying a helicopter. And it's like somebody told them if they did that, they could write off their helicopter list. So I think that's the part of the deal. But just about anything as a writer, because we write about just about anything. I mean, you see the Shopaholic series, which I kind of like some of these cozy mysteries and cozy stories like that.
Yeah.
You know, she goes out and she buys all these designer clothes. That's the whole kind of premise. And then she gets into these misadventures. Well, buying and shopping for all these designer clothes becomes a write-off because she's writing about those. So whatever it is that happens to be your little obsession could end up being a write-off. And nobody else gets the same thing. I mean, as a CPA, I can't write off a trip to Italy to learn about wine, but as a writer, I could. So it's an interesting little thing there. It's just a case of that becomes then a legitimate deduction on your tax return. Additionally, you are often limited in what you can take write-offs. Like, for example, you could, like, let's say you have real estate and your real estate runs at a loss. Well, you may not be able to take that loss against your other income. There's a bunch of complicated rules. But as a business owner, if you can prove you're serious about business, then you can have losses for your business loss when you pick up these expenses against your other income. You just need to show that you're truly working in this and that you're serious about it. That's the big question.
That's awesome. And what are some ways I would imagine they don't have, like, you know, hard and fast objective criteria for proving that you're really serious, but do you have any suggestions on ways for authors to prove that they're really serious?
Well, it's interesting, the IRS, I haven't heard any stories lately of the IRS going after them. I did hear in New York, though, that the state of New York did go after authors for a little bit, and they wanted to see that they were truly serious. And in that case, everybody there had a published book. And so it was like, hey, look, I wrote this book, and then the audit problems just went away. So actually being published is your best bet. And I think just a print on demand and having some books there, I mean, it's really obvious, and especially if it shows, I mean, you can form a company and become, you know, evergreen publishing or whatever you want to be. And what is the difference between that and the million other press labels out there? I think it also becomes a great way of branding, which I know you're very good at as well, always branding. So that's something just to think about, that if you start doing that and building out this brand, then you'll end up being able to take a write-off at the same time.
This is possibly one of the best motivations for publishing a book that I've ever heard. Because you hear you hear all my reasons. Tell your story, change the world, change lives. All very valid reasons, by the way. You know, tell your story. Of course. You know, get, especially like a memoir, to, you know, to get it off your chest and to really help understand and connect the dots of your crazy life and everything. But hey, this is fun. I like this reason too.
Get right up
so you can go to wine country.
Right.
So I've just decided I'm really fascinated. I'm fascinated by time travel. How can I work that next?
I'm not sure. Maybe you need to do it like everybody who's had a crazy idea about time travel, and you have to go visit where they were at in the museums and something. I don't know. Yeah,
there we go. This is great. I love that. That's wow. This interview just started off like with so much value. Thank you. That's just awesome. Oh my gosh. So let's see. So I hear people, and you definitely experienced this, people debating whether or not they should, you know, DIY their taxes with TurboTax or H&R Block or one of those, or if they should go to a professional. So for authors and freelancers especially, what are the kind of criteria for deciding, is my tax situation uncomplicated enough where I can do it myself, or are there certain factors where it's like, you should probably go somewhere, you know, to an outside professional just because of XYZ factors?
Right. Well, definitely. I mean, especially in 2018, because the tax law did get very much simplified for most people that don't have businesses or a lot of investments. And I mean, the joke, you might have seen the old, they called it the short form. How much did you make? Line 2, send it in. And sadly, that became a little true because the taxes have really gone up for people who don't get the write-offs with businesses. So if you, just a comment here, if you're experiencing as you're doing your taxes going, oh my gosh, my taxes went up, what am I going to do? Consider your writing that now is the time to really create it as a business, because once you show some income, you can take a bunch of expenses against it. And that means you can have that loss that offsets your income. So just a little tidbit there. But in answer to your question, if you do understand, like a typical independent contractor would be a sole proprietorship or a Schedule C, the form's not really complicated. It did get a little more complicated because we have this new 20% income deduction that you get if you've got income in that business. So that might be something you need to talk to a tax professional about. But otherwise, I mean, generally, TurboTax is a good solution for a lot of people. They walk you through it. My strong suggestion for most people, though, is to extend this year unless you have a super simple tax return, just because the IRS is not fully back to work yet. I mean, on the day that we're recording this, the government's still shut down. The IRS is not back to work. E-filing is still not working. Even they discontinued it for even prior years, and there's nobody to call if you have a problem. So it's better to just extend, and you can do that with your individual return 4868. Just file it. You can't e-file it right now, so you might just need to print it out, mail it, and send it, sort of a return receipt requested so you got proof of it. And then you can extend your return to all the way to October 15th. But I would personally wait on filing, because I have this feeling that when the software does, 4868. I think when the software does come out, I just think it's going to be real glitchy, because they don't even have forms out yet. And yet they're supposed to go live in a week. These software companies, they have to program around forms, and we don't have forms yet. So I don't know what these guys are going to do. It's going to be kind of a mess, I think.
I think I picked the right vocation. I don't know. Government shutdowns affect ghostwriting too much. This is good.
Yeah. Okay, let me get you. So 4868 if you've got an individual tax return. 7004 is the form if you have a business, a partnership, or an S corp or something. You use that to extend it.
Yeah.
I
want to make sure that we definitely extend it. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Best Inc. authors Q&A ever.
Thank you.
It's not very different. I mean, all of ours are, oh my gosh, I have like the best experts that I brought onto this. So I'm very blessed. So that is the DIY versus outside. So speaking of outside professionals, so kind of like a tax terminology one-on-one, what are the differences when we hear, accountant, bookkeeper, CPA, all the different terms, tax professional?
Right. So a CPA maybe does tax returns, maybe doesn't. So CPAs could have a whole bunch of different varieties. We've all had a college degree. It now takes 5 years to get that degree, 5 years of school, and then you have an internship and you have to pass a CPA exam, and then you become a CPA and certified public accountant. And then we have certain hours we have to meet every year. But the question is, not all CPAs are specialists in taxes. Sometimes they're specialists in financial accounting, or taking companies public, or doing audits. So make sure that whoever you're working with, if you want them to do taxes, that's what they do. Another one that I think is valuable is an enrolled agent, an EA. They're people that pass a test that the IRS gives them, and they're certified only for tax work. So they don't do any of the other things like audits, but they definitely know their stuff when it comes to taxes. Tax attorneys are typically, they come in if you're in trouble or if you're really needing, because they've got full confidentiality. They can go argue in court. CPAs and EAs have a limited ability to argue in court, but attorneys have got full confidentiality. They can go help you with that. But generally, attorneys are not preparing your tax returns. A bookkeeper is somebody who does your financial records. Bookkeepers can do your tax returns, but they may or may not know how to do it, and then there isn't any professional organization behind them. Unless it's a really super, super simple tax return, I'm always a little nervous when I hear a bookkeeper does a return, because you have no idea how good they are. Anybody can be a bookkeeper.
Awesome. This is very good. Let's see, and before we get to questions, because I know there was one posted in the Inc. Authors Facebook group, any other tax advice, tips, strategies for authors and freelancers that you haven't covered so far?
I think the biggest thing is that the idea is, once you have a business, I mean, you decide that being a writer is a business. Like I love your post that you've done recently, where instead of do you have a book inside you, do you have a writer inside you? And so I'm going to say, not only is there an author or a writer inside you, but there's also, as soon as you have a business. And as soon as you start thinking of that as a business, I think in a lot of ways it helps you be better at writing, because it's kind of like your job then. You're working for this business. But it's also, okay, now wait a minute. As a writer, I have my desk. I mean, I'm in a home office is what you see in the back of me right now. By the way, that painting on the wall is an original, and it's a write-off, because it's hanging on the wall in my office. So, and a friend of mine, you can't see it, but over there's a mosaic she made for me, and that's a write-off. So, anything that you have inside your home office becomes a write-off. The chair I'm sitting on, the computer, all of these things are tax deductions. So it helps you, I think, make more money when you start thinking of it like a real business, but you also start thinking, well, what are deductions? Later, I'm taking my sound and video guy, who happens to be my son, out to lunch, and that'll be a write-off because we're going to talk about lighting, how we can do lighting in the recording studio. So anyway, you start having things that are write-offs. So I think it's kind of a mindset change, where maybe if you've never had a business before, you're not used to thinking of, is this a deduction? Instead, ask, how can I deduct this? And especially for things that maybe you spend a lot of money on, or you really are passionate about, that can become a great deduction. And like for me, I keep going on about this wine country. I have this idea for a cozy mystery series I want to do where it's centered in wine country. So that, of course, means I have to visit a lot of different wineries so I can set the ambiance for it. Yeah, exactly. Research. Murder on the Malbec. I don't know.
That sounds like Edgar Allan Poe or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the progression there, by the way. Yeah, and that was actually James Scott Bell, author of the Art of War for Writers, this fiction tools book. And he came, and I quoted him in my recent Writer Wednesday email. Do you have a book inside you? Because we hear this all the time. Do you have a book inside you? And it's just and it's a different approach when you say, do you have an author? Like, so the Writer Wednesday I did this week, as you know, was how would it feel different? How would it be different? How would the results be different if you approached the writing of your book as a professional author who does it for a living versus someone who happens to be writing a book, whether that book is supposed to be a business tool or whatever, but it's like a side thing. Your approach will be different. Your results will be different. The quality of the book will be different. My big quality drum that I bang on a lot. And I like how you just advanced this to, do you have a book inside you? Do you have an author inside you? Do you have a business inside you? I think that's a great progression.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I think we should do this more often.
I could talk to all my expert friends every day. I could just, be Oprah. Oprah for authors. Actually, she invented authors for their book club. Let me read the question I got from Miss Regina. And well, she has a few, so let's start with this. So my questions are, do you have to report all your earnings as a writer, or is there a minimum you have to report? For example, if I made $50, I don't have to report it, but if I made $100, I do. So let's do that one first because it's like a two-part question.
Okay, so in general, if you've got over $500 is always kind of this benchmark amount, you do need to report. I'm going to challenge, though, that I think you should report even if it is $50, because it then shows that you're serious about this. So you do your Schedule C, you've got income $50. Okay, fine. At least you've got some income. You're doing something. And then, by the way, I'm going to take a write-off for my computer and my cell phone or anything that I'm using as tool, my ISP. What are you using for tools in your business? By the way, if you just say, okay, this is my first year being a writer and I'm using a computer that I've had for a couple of years, just what you're doing then is contributing it to the business at whatever the fair market value is. So maybe you paid $1,500 for it a couple of years ago, but it's only worth $500. Don't get greedy. Like we say pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So you want to be just a little piggy here, not a big hog. But so just whatever the fair market value is of whatever it is that you're going to be using. But I think it's better to start it right away. And then, if you ever are challenged down the road, a big author, and hey, I'm taking this trip to Italy, the IRS asks to say, I've been writing for 5 years. Maybe I wasn't successful in the beginning, but I've been writing for all this time. You have a track record then.
I like that. That's a really great perspective.
By the end of this, we're all going to Italy. I just
feel like we're all going on a wine tour.
Yeah.
I still want to do time travel, but okay. Okay. Let's see. And her next one. Okay. And if I haven't paid my sales tax for earnings at a comiccon, for instance, is that a really bad thing, or can I pay them late? And does the city state know if I haven't paid?
Okay. Well, what name, living at what street has asked? No, I'm kidding. We're not gonna out you here. Okay. The question is, this is a good one because sales tax is like a big deal right now. And so if you're selling a product, chances are you're going to have sales tax. And if you're selling it where you come to my booth and you can buy a book right here, chances are it's subject to sales tax. However, depending on the state you're in, there might be a threshold. Like, for example, there's a number of states that they don't really care until you're over $10,000. So this is one of my favorite tax answers. It depends. So it depends on whether you live in the state in which you had this, in which case, yeah, you probably do need to collect it right from the get-go. Or if you visited California, for example, and just sold a few ancillary things, it might not be subject to it if you're just selling at Comic-Con when it was down there in San Diego or something like that.
Awesome. Let me make sure, but I think that's pretty much all the questions here, unless someone's messaging me. No, someone else. Okay.
Just for anybody who's watching this, if you've got questions, go to Ink Authors, and you can ask a question in there, and I'll jump in periodically, and if that's okay with you, and answer tax questions.
Definitely, and I'm going to post the link to Ink Authors. I'm going to start posting some links here, and we'll post your links also in the chat window here, so people can do that. I'm just doing some navigating.
I have a blog that I do 3 times a week on ustaxaid.com, and people can. I just write about what's kind of hot, what's going on right now, because it's a little actually insane in our tax world right now.
I would imagine.
Tax season starting, and the IRS is shut down. It is kind of crazy.
I just added that. Okay, cool. I got that right? ustaxaid.com. Okay, good. We got that in there. And is that like a good hub for you if they want to find you on all the other social media networks and everything like that to start there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is. And I also do have the Facebook group, Diane Kennedy's U.S. Tax Group. Yes. I had to think about what it's called. Diane Kennedy's U.S. Tax Group.
But if they go to one of these 2 places here, they're going to find you.
You'll find me.
That's awesome. Well, good. We are going to shift gears a little bit, not too much, because we're staying on the subject of taxes, because you are a New York Times best-selling author on the subject of taxes, which is awesome. And yeah, I love your technique to launches. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here. So, but first of all, tell us how you made the transition from tax professional to published author of tax books all the way up to New York Times bestselling author. So tell us how you made that transition.
I'll tell you how I did it, and I don't know that this would work today because the world has changed. The world has shifted. But back when I started, and we're talking the 90s, I co-authored a couple of books, and then it was actually kind of interesting because it came out of a real frustration. Robert Kiyosaki, who people may or may not know, who wrote the Rich Dad Poor Dad series and became this big, he was actually a client of mine in the 90s. And it was before he wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, and actually when he had his other business that he talks about in there that he sold and then bought real estate, and then he kind of started up another company. And I was his CPA through that transition. But I was complaining about how often I have to have the same conversation with my clients. That, I have to, what I want to do is get to the strategy. But because the language and the things we do are kind of rarefied, and it's arcane where it's difficult to understand, that a lot of what I do is educational. And so it was frustrating to me because I spent so much of my clients' money telling everybody the same thing. And his answer was, write a book. I was like, why don't I think of that? I'll write a book. And so I wrote a book, and it was under his umbrella at Rich Dad Poor Dad, was the first book that I wrote by myself. And that's what got me into, I was with, who was I with first? Warner Books, and who isn't even around anymore. And so because I was under this label and I was with Warner Books, and I did lots and lots of PR. I've never done paid advertising, and I'm probably about to break that, where I'm actually going to start doing some paid ads. But everything I've always done has just been completely, before it was SEO and cool, that kind of thing. I would do PR, I'd do any interview I could. I followed Mark Vincent Hansen, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Yep. He used to do a conference called an author's conference. I don't even know if you can get those anymore. Back in the day, it was on cassette tapes. Yeah. And one of his things was, when you have a book out there, you do an interview every single day. And every single day. But the reality is you can't get them 7 days a week, but it's okay as long as you get 7 interviews a week. So he would target an area, and this would be like, maybe I'm going to go for, I'll pick on our old hometown, Reno, Nevada, which had about 300,000 people. So not a huge city, but medium size. And then go to every single radio station, every single TV station, every weekly newspaper, anything that's in Reno, and pitch them. And the idea is that you completely just flood that area with, I'm an expert on, so this is nonfiction, but I'm an expert on X. and you can learn about these things. And then to prep the interviews, I always would send a book or whatever I'm doing, but just assume that whoever's interviewing me hasn't read it. So I would often send questions. Hey, here's 10 questions you may or may not want to ask. And so it made them sound really smart. And they would usually ask some, usually not all of them, but some of those questions. And so I would do just tours and lots of radio and occasionally TV. And then I got picked up as an expert for the Wall Street Journal and LA Times. And so I would get quoted a lot with those. And boy, once you get that, you're golden, because then you're every time they see that, and they always say, Diane Kennedy, author of, in the interviews, and you can just watch your book sales spike whenever that happens. And so that's how it happened, is just interviews all the time. And that is basically what I'm still doing. Now, though, the other thing that I would add, again, because I've got a nonfiction book, is I've got teasers in there to make sure you register your book to get these free bonuses. And they're real bonuses. Yeah. And I also, for like the last book I wrote, which is Taxmageddon, you can see behind me, Taxmageddon 2018. When you go to taxmageddon2018.com, you'll be encouraged to buy the book from Amazon, and then come back to the page and register your book by going to chapter 16, and here's the hidden little code. But you get into a private forum that's only for readers of Taxmageddon. And so I drop in all the latest things that are happening in there. And then they can ask questions, and so you create a group in there. But what we do along the way, we capture their opt-in information. And so I've built a database. And for me anyway, my whole marketing is database driven. And that's what I do now, because I've got a large database and I've kept them over the years. I give out good information. I do typically 2 to 3 emails a week, but they're not all pitchy. They're like, okay, here's things. And I have people opt out, which is fine, but I also have people join, and it's growing. And they read, it's a high read and high retention. And so when I'm going to do a book launch, I do a book launch email, and that's basically how I do it. That's how I did it with this last book, which I did solely on Amazon. And I went to the top in 6 categories, #1 in 6 categories, including some categories I wasn't registered in, which was hilarious to watch happen.
That's awesome. Somebody
Somebody told me that Amazon adds you to categories if they see you're like suddenly a hot property, and they'll just add you into stuff. And then I went to #1 in those. And by the way, take lots of screenshots when that's happening, so that you've got it, because it's not historic otherwise. And then just use that later in your advertising. But I think the secret is just do a launch, get it out there, and then capture the emails and make it worthwhile for them to be part of giving you their information. That's the biggest secret to me, is build an email list.
Yeah, and I'm on your email
list.
I'm on your email list, and you're right. It's not pitchy at all. It's very valuable. It just sounds like you talking just like you're talking right now about whatever is happening in the news. And there's always things happening in the news that affect taxes, it seems like.
Right.
So you have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. And now the question I've had, and I know we've had this conversation as well, I don't know how that translates for fiction. I'm still trying to find the part of that. Although I think you've done a brilliant job, because you write as well as you help writers. And so by talking about your writing experience, you bring in other writers who want to have the same experience. So you build that database, and that's how you go.
I definitely feel like I've gotten into a rhythm in the last few years, and I can tell because it feels natural and nothing feels like I'm pushing anymore. Right. And that's my favorite part, is that I think I was just for years just figuring out where the zone of genius was and what people wanted to hear and what I wanted to talk about. And just, it feels much more natural, and every idea I come up with, it it kind of works, it all goes.
Right. Yeah. And then as far as just being just in general, the whole publishing process, I use Fiverr a lot. I outsource a lot of things. And so I've got somebody who's actually worked with me on my web design and web tech stuff. And we've been together, like 11, 12 years. And he lives in Argentina. And so he does my book covers, and also sets up my websites. I have a virtual assistant who's in Pakistan. And so she helps with my social media and keeps things going. I am an American citizen living in Mexico. So we have a very international system.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I've seen you don't have to talk about your numbers, but I've just seen that your net profit numbers off your books, because you keep your production costs so low, because you can spend, just when people, ask me like, how much does it cost to self-publish a book? Well, we spend go from the gamut of basically free. Like if
Right.
theoretically speaking, if you knew how to do layout and cover design and you were in editing, well, nobody should be their own editor. But technically, I guess you could publish a book for free, or you could go up to, depending if you want to hire a publicist, up to 6 figures. So the range is enormous, but you're definitely, I've noticed, because you're so great at, you have your team, you're kind of like production line of, layout people, cover design, you outsource all these things. You've managed to keep your production costs like the lowest I've seen. And that's why I'm glad that you addressed that. So you recommend using kind of those websites. How can you tell if someone's good, or, where would someone start? Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I see is that I actually found my VA through, I think it was Fiverr, I don't remember now, Elance or something like that. But you try it out, and that's part of it. And actually, I have a really funny story on this. I was a speaker at a conference that was in the Caribbean, and it was a very high level, lots of wealthy people, and I was talking about taxes. And there was a couple of young guys, they're college students, and I'm thinking, okay, they don't seem like they're making a lot of money. What are they here for? And the idea had been is that they had this idea for an app on a phone, and what it was basically like a QuickBooks kind of thing, only for cryptocurrency. And this is back when cryptocurrency was just taking off. And so they said, oh, this is going to be a hot thing. And so what we want to do is get in a room with a whole bunch of rich people, and we're going to pitch them to get the money to build this, because it's going to be expensive to build out this accounting software. So this is the funny story. Both of them were day traders and made a little bit of money. And they said, okay, so we figured we wanted to have some kind of just something cool that people could use just to see what it might be like, but of course none of the engine behind it. And we'll spend like $5,000 to get that done. And then which is not very much money to have like a very customized type of solution, just for the, the flash on the whole thing. And we know what we're going to do is we're just going to outsource it to, I don't remember if it was India or Pakistan or someplace like that. But because we may or may not get it done, we're going to do it. We're going to hire 3 different people. And we figure out of 3 of them, 1 of them will get it done. The other 2 might flake and never finish. And they have a timeline. And they made sure they didn't pay the whole amount of money up front. They paid them something. And sure enough, 2 of them completely flaked, didn't make it. The 3rd guy misunderstood what he was supposed to do. And instead of writing the showpiece for it, of this product, he wrote the product. It was done.
Oh my God.
For $5,000. And so these guys were like shell shocked because they'd just gotten it the week before. And they're like, and I remember talking to them, well, why are you here? Well, we were looking for investors. Oh, what? But we don't need them anymore. It's like, we're done. And then they took a story, and it was like, okay, I guess you're just coming to this conference to drink with rich people. But,
wine.
Yeah, around the Caribbean it's rum. But anyway, and the place we were at, which another funny story, rum was so cheap compared to like Coke that if you got a rum and Coke, you got more rum than you got Coke. Yeah, exactly. So you can tell how we were all at the conference. But the thing that just amazes me is that I think we go into this sometimes with our kind of American mindset on how much things need to cost.
Yeah.
Now, the deliverables may or may not work. And as you go from country to country, you're going to find that there's different attitudes, and you need to be careful and very specific on what you want. Open-ended research doesn't work in some areas because they will research till the cows come home, and they're charging by the hour, which might not be much, but they just spent 100 hours on it. So if you can be really clear on what it is you want, then that works. And that's just worked really well for me. Just finding people and just realizing that I keep my costs down because the person may or may not work out. The design may or may not work out. I go to 99 Designs sometimes where I need just a new idea. I mean, there's amazing how many things you can find online that just really work.
Yeah, I was going to say I've used 99 Designs for myself and my clients, and that's just for people who aren't familiar with 99designs.com. I'll put that right here. That's basically a cover design, and not just cover design. Let me see if I can type and talk at the same time. It's like a graphic design contest. So whether you're looking for a new logo for your company, or just any kind of graphic or illustration you need, or in this case, book covers, it's a whole bunch of designers from all over the world will come together and compete in a contest. So last I checked, the low end was like $300. I don't know if that's still the same. It was around then for the very basic contest. And then you can add bells and whistles and exclusivity and things like that. And yeah, so you get like tons and tons of book cover options that you can look at and choose the winner. You choose so rather than, hiring one book cover designer, you have access to potentially hundreds. So I like it.
And then, I know, I love that. And, I've gotten that, and then you choose one. It's like, well, I like this, except I'd like this tweak and that tweak. I'll do that.
You can talk to them.
Yeah.
So lots of ways to publish a book. We're not going to go into all the rest of the, the book publishing journey here. That could be a lot, but that was a great first step. And I liked the advice that you gave about, if you are going to, outside of 99 Designs, going to Fiverr or Elance, which is now called Upwork or anything like that.
I knew there was a new name.
Having multiple, maybe hiring multiple people to do the same thing and, for whatever you can afford and see what you like the best.
Yeah. Now for me, editing is like twofold. I need both for like grammar and spelling and, all of those kinds of things.
That's a different beast. Yeah.
Right. And then I also need technical to make sure what I just said was right. And so, and that part is typically the first part of that I have done. And my husband, again, I'm very fortunate because he knows this stuff too, and he's very good at that. He's always my technical to make sure that I didn't, and he just challenges me. He reads everything I do, and it's like, are you sure that's right? And so that's how we do that. And then of course you need just for readability. So I go through that multiple times with, different people and different functions there. Then the other thing I do is I actually read the book out loud 3 times. And that just because make sure it sounds the way I want it to sound. In my world, the things can get really technical quickly, and then it's just jargon. It doesn't make any sense to the average reader. And so I want to make sure that it can be spoken without getting too crazy. And then if it can be spoken, then it becomes readable. The last time I read it, I record it. And then up until now, my recording studio, which was my office, wasn't up to audible.com standards, so I couldn't do anything with it, but I gave it away as a free giveaway later on. When you sign up for Kindle Unlimited, you're limited in what you can do for 3 months. But then once that passes, then you can do stuff. And so I've created like this bundle of, you can get this for free if you do this. And so everything I'm doing, I've got multiple pieces to that I try to give lots of bonuses, because what I'm after, not even so much the sale, but I'm trying to get people on my opt-in list.
Yeah, I like the creativity there. And then on editing, that's something like if we're talking about finding, especially like overseas, low cost, designers and layout people and everything like that, editing, I definitely recommend people, invest whatever you can in that to do the job, because a good editor that's the thing that can make your book, I don't know how to say this, like, oh God, this is obviously a self-published book.
Right. Yeah.
To someone who picks up the book and they just wouldn't know the difference. They wouldn't know if they're going to, flip the book over and see that it's, self-published on Amazon, or if it's by, HarperCollins or, Simon & Schuster, or one of those. A great editor, it's phenomenal the quality that they can up level your book to. So definitely, one of the few areas that invest in editors for sure.
And you have a resource,
by the way. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. You have resources for good editors in your group?
Yes, there's one that I work with, but and I think there's a lot of talented editors and ink authors. That's why I love this group of ink authors group on Facebook that I've assembled, because there are so many experts in there, and you've seen it, and because you're one of the experts, and you've seen how when people have a question about whether it's publishing or publicity or design or editing or anything, there's always 3 or 4, and I always jump in and tag 3 or 4 people because I know who's in the group, and I'd love to know all the people that I don't know that are in the group that are experts. So that's one of the things that I love about our intentionally small ink authors group on Facebook.
Which I highly recommend.
Yeah, thank you. So that's all I have, unless, let me just check to see if anybody, speaking of ink authors, if there's any other questions there. And I'm sure people will jump in later to talk to you, hopefully, on ink authors. If you have any additional questions for Diane after watching this, and you are most likely watching this on YouTube, so I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, Christine Ink, on YouTube. I could put the link there, but we'll just go and link crazy here today. And I thank you very much, Diane. Oh my gosh, this has been so exciting, and I've been wanting to do this for so long, so I'm glad we finally made it happen, because I know when you posted recently some of your tips for authors and freelance writers, your tax tips, got a great response to that post, so I said, all right, this is the time to do it.
Okay, it's tax time. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. It's
Thank you
nice
so
seeing you.
much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. And I'll see everybody in Ink Authors.